Now this question has got a life of its own. People think they can use it to prove, anything. I mean, let's just make a list. I've heard Oprah use it to defend the idea that all religions lead to heaven. I've heard Christians use it to defend the idea that they, don't need to prove the Bible, you can just believe it by faith. I've heard atheists use it to defend the idea that the Bible is nonsense. I've heard Calvinists use it to defend the idea that God doesn't love everybody. So the same question can be used to prove that all religions are right. Asking for proof is pointless. Believe the Bible no matter what. The Bible is nonsense. And God hates some people. Before we get any deeper into this video, I'm just going to go ahead and apologize in advance for the monotony of hearing my voice the entire time. Let me put this in the simplest way I can think of. I say this knowing that you already have mountains of baggage that help you misunderstand Christianity with amazing speed. And if you are a Muslim, then your holy scriptures lay the misunderstandings out for you so you can be accurately wrong. I do have some meager hope, some glimmer, some shining little twinkle that I can share what Christianity is without someone scrolling down with some great idea with ferocious speed to comment away. And of course, whatever you comment, it's not going to be remotely new. You think it is, but dude, we've heard it. In Christianity, the basic belief is that all people are evil, because we all do evil. Therefore, we have rejected God by doing this. We will receive what we ask for, which is an eternity away from God, who is the source of goodness itself. You want evil in your life, you want goodness out of your life. God is the source of all goodness, God out of your life. That's an eternity away from God, eternity away from the source of all goodness. Now, the only way out of this is by Jesus Christ suffering in your place. Jesus did this, but it won't apply to you unless you want it to. If you do want it to, then you believe. And that's how it can apply to you. In other words, the book of Romans chapter 10 says it like this. For if you confess with your mouth Jesus as Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. The Christian idea of salvation is not limited to life after death in heaven or hell. I know pretty much every Sunday school teacher, preacher, and adult has told you that that's what the Christian idea of salvation is. Stay with me, and we will journey into the unknown world of actually reading the Bible. If you take a few risks in life and crack open the New Testament, you will see that it's salvation from evil itself, even the evil inside us. There's much more we could say about these issues, and I probably have answered many of your questions on my channel somewhere. Look under the playlist for whatever you're about to write comments about. You can do it, I believe. Now, to put it in the simplest terms, the question we are focused on today is the issue of whether people who never hear of Jesus will go to heaven or hell. That's the simplest way. We're going to look at the heaven and hell thing today for the purposes of this video. But understand that that's not all salvation is about. You obviously cannot believe in Jesus if you've never heard of Jesus. Hopefully that's pretty simple. And so we have Exhibit A in the catalog of Bible verses that are so often misinterpreted that actual textbooks probably exist that put the misinterpretations in print. In print, people. Romans 10, verse 14. How then can they call on the one they have not believed in? And how can they believe in the one whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? And how can anyone preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring the good news. So this verse asks us questions, which we can then somehow twist into statements if we're, good little bad Bible interpreters. What it really means is that people who never hear the message of Jesus preached to them will never be able to go to heaven. Of course, that's what it means, right? Now, I know that it technically didn't say that. Just ask some questions. But as long as you let me quote this one verse and then preach for an hour on it while telling you who to vote for in November, you won't doubt me. Now, please, whatever you do, don't continue reading. You gotta stop that. I mean, if you want to keep the echo chamber of bad ideas just bouncing back and forth forever, then by all means, just repeat what you're told. Okay, so we're going to read on. Reading on Romans 10, verse 16. Gasp. It says, but not all the Israelites accepted the good news. For Isaiah says, Lord, who has believed our message? Wait, whoa. You telling me that this passage, that everyone from the north, south, east, and west applies to remote countries without missionaries or preachers, is actually, obviously, it's talking about Jews? I mean, aren't the Jews pretty much aware of Jesus? Didn't the first Christian missionaries have a rule? I mean, it's in Acts over and over again. First Jews, then the Gentiles. Now, if you think that's a big, just wait, it gets worse. Verse 17. Consequently, faith comes from hearing the message, and the message is heard through the words about Christ. But I ask, did they not hear? Of course they did. Their voice has gone out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. So Paul repeats his question from before, but he actually answers it. Why does no one ever quote this part? I mean, does it remind you of anything other than absurdly disrespectful fakeness? What was Paul's answer exactly? This answer that no one likes to quote? He quoted a Bible verse. A Bible verse? What? Why do we never turn to this verse? He considers it the answer to the questions that he asked, but people are too busy giving their own answers instead of just letting the Bible answer his own questions. Oh, we got an echo chamber where you bounce dumb ideas back and forth that we need to keep it going until Jesus returns. I mean, it's really amazing how right Meg Ryan was. I read this in Time magazine when I was a teenager, and she said, the Bible is a book everybody has an opinion on, but nobody actually reads. That is true. Now this verse Paul quotes is from Psalm 19. He was actually really fond of making his points by quoting the Old Testament, which would have been the Bible. I mean, he was literally writing the New Testament. Okay? So, Psalm 19 starts out in verse 1 like this. It says, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. They have no speech. They use no words. There is no sound heard from them. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth, and their words to the ends of the world. So the world God has created gives us knowledge of God's glory. Well, by all means, please don't take time to meditate on that. Continue reading! And skip over it super fast like every guy who ever preaches on this passage loves to do. I mean, speech and knowledge of God's glory without the use of words. Folks, that's amazing. Amazing. That's in the big deal category. You're going to be pretty hard pressed to find a person who doesn't have access to this knowledge. Now, you may be saying that this all just warms your heart, and you want to go in a Christian bookstore and, buy your napkin holder with this passage monogrammed onto it. But the atheists in the room have a question to raise. Their hands are going up, and they say, snobby atheist question, right? And if they don't have this question, then they're a sorry excuse for an atheist. The question is this: where is this knowledge? We look at the sky and we see the sky. We look at the creation, the world, the cosmos, and that's what we see, the world. How does this prove to us anything other than that the world is here? What this passage says, along with others in the Bible, is that there is proof for God, but the Bible isn't going to hand feed it to you. You have to go looking for the proof. And the Bible just tells you where to look. And so atheists get upset that God isn't hand feeding them all the information. So they go online and comment to any Christian they can find and just let them know that religion is dumb, I'm an atheist, and I'm smart. Look at my big words that I use the wrong definitions for and hope that you don't catch me. According to the Bible, God does not hand feed us everything. Now, since I want this video to end before the Andromeda Galaxy collides with ours, I will spare you from going through proofs for God's existence. They're on my channel. I made playlists. Go and play. Assuming for this video that these verses are correct and that there is proof. I'm about to sneeze in a minute. It's like so weird. I bet that probably drove crazy. Alright. Assuming for this video that there is proof that these verses are correct, that would mean that humans can be aware of God's glory by way of what God has created. Now hopefully you have realized that this isn't really the same thing as knowing about Jesus. Jesus knew this point too. And Christians are supposed to be like Jesus, so good for you. Jesus said in John chapter 7, verse 17, "Anyone who chooses to do the will of God will find out whether my teaching comes from God or whether I speak on my own." Well, what? That's a promise. What a promise. But I need to bore you. You need to be bored. I'm going to bore you. This is logic. Okay, logic works in chains. A, therefore B, therefore C, blah, 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 therefore. Okay? If you know the glory of God, then therefore, you know that God is good. Therefore, you will try to be good and be like God. If you try to be good, then you will realize the failures you have made and admit that you are not good. Now, as an alternative, you can simply pretend that you haven't made any mistakes by way of some rationalization. But denial is not just a river in Egypt. Denial is a core teaching of Islam and a million other views. So if you admit you're not good, then you will therefore admit you need forgiveness. And if you're willing to admit all of this stuff, then you could not be more ready to hear about how Jesus died for your sins. If you are not willing to admit this stuff, we begin to wonder what the point is in you hearing about Jesus. I mean, maybe the story of Jesus will push you over the edge into the abyss of actually being honest. But other than that, you're probably pretty close-minded towards the Jesus thing. This is the point that the question from the title of the video misses. In other words, I'm raising a question, but it's really a trick question. In logic, we call it a complex question. It's like, have you stopped beating your wife? It may sound like a simple yes or no question, but it's really 4 questions, right? Have you stopped beating your wife is really not just yes or no, but also, I'd never beat my wife, or I'm not married, or I'm a woman, you know. The original question of what happens to people who never hear about Jesus is a complex question, or in Latin it's inquisitus pluribus. Okay? What part of the Jesus message have people not heard? Do you mean the existence of the glorious God of goodness part? According to the Bible, everyone has access to that. Or do you mean the part about trying to live your life in accordance with God's goodness? Do you mean admitting that you have failed at being good? Or do you mean hearing the story of Jesus' life? You see, those are all different parts. All but the last of that, the last part, is available to anyone on this planet at any time. If those verses are correct. And we'll assume for the sake of this video that they are. So if those verses are correct, then all but the last are available to anyone on this planet at any time. Now if you don't believe me, then you can watch my videos about the proof stuff. But that's my point here, is that this is a trick question. While a lot of people die without ever hearing about Jesus, we don't know if they were actually receptive to the other parts of the Jesus message which they have heard. Now Jesus makes a promise back in John 7. If you're willing to really try and do the will of God, then you will find out the truth about Jesus. Now this leaves a few questions about special cases, but I want that to sink in before we move forward. In other words, if you're willing to admit the truth, then Jesus made a promise, you will hear about me. If you're willing to really try to do the will of God, you're going to find out about Jesus. Now, on to the special cases. Typically, the special cases people want to talk about are like babies and children that die, or mentally handicapped people. Now, what amazes me about these cases is that we think God actually needs us for anyone to come to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. Sometimes I think preachers believe they will go to jail or something for telling you one simple truth. You're telling people about Jesus is not necessary for people to come to salvation. I know it may come as a shock, but God doesn't need our help. I know. God exists to affirm our personal greatness and give us a list of merit badges to achieve. But how could God get along without your help? I mean, when you get to heaven, God's going to thank you and tell you that, He didn't have anything figured out till you came along. I mean, you know what God has up His sleeve? Other people. Yes, if you don't tell a person about Jesus, someone else may. It happens all the time. Also, there are these magic things called books and radio and a lot of other stuff. Info is out there. Baby, I mean, you may be smart enough, and you may say, but what about people like babies or the mentally handicapped who they're in a situation where they literally cannot be communicated with by any human, by anything that any human ever has. Well, what about them? Do not despair. There are bad theology experts who've made up an unbiblical and dangerous idea for you out of almost pure thin air. Thin air maybe would be more justified than the Old Testament passage that they tweak to try to justify this. I won't insult your intelligence by even bothering to repeat it, even if only to break it down. They call this thing the age of accountability. And the age of accountability says that if a child dies before some generic age, which typically is unspecified, before a child can understand about Jesus, then that child goes to heaven. Yes, Christians have found a way to justify a back door into heaven for the young, even when Jesus says, there's no way to the Father but by me. But don't worry. They tell you, they're getting in through Jesus. God's grace of Jesus extends to the young, who are too young to know about Jesus. And at this point, these people are doing, which are the majority, are doing just a superb job of ignoring this other part where it says this, everyone who believes in Him shall not perish but have everlasting life. The funny thing about the age of accountability is that it doesn't account, hold on, before I move on with that. Yeah. These young people need to believe in Jesus. They have to know about Jesus to believe in Jesus. That's my point. Now, the funny thing about the age of accountability is that it doesn't account for the mentally handicapped that may suffer brain damage later in life. That's kind of a strange, specific scenario. But this age of accountability answer, accounts for, it doesn't even account for this situation. I don't want to belittle the need for people to comfort their grieving parents when the children die. But do we really need to use blatantly unbiblical lies to do so? Are the devil's tactics really more effective than God's? For those of you who have a taste for the absurd, in logic we call this reducto ad absurdum. And the age of accountability, if we take it to be true, then it reduces to an absurdity. Other absurd things have to be true. And this absurd thing would be, we should just kill all children so there's no chance of anyone going to hell. I mean, the worst thing you can do is let someone live past the age of accountability, because then they might go to hell. But if you kill them, then they won't go to hell. That's the absurdity. This age of accountability thing becomes a justification for mass genocide of all children, which, I think we're pretty clear that that's not a good idea. Now, the simple answer is really simple, and it applies to the babies and the brain damage. God is capable. God is capable of sharing Himself with anyone, anywhere. I mean, do you really think that He needs us? Do you really think that God doesn't love people enough to share Himself with them? Do you really think that there are people in heaven who weren't given the option to accept or reject Jesus' love? That's fundamental. Do you think God just puts people in heaven without them even having a choice? Is it really love when you don't have a choice? And again, Jesus is on top of this. I mean, the level at which people are willing to ignore the Bible can blow a person's mind to bits. But look what Jesus says. John 6:44. No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws them, and I will raise them up at the last day. It is written in the prophets, they will all be taught by God. Look, that's just the most rootin' tootin'est thing I've ever heard. I mean, nobody, and I mean literally it says absolutely no one, can come to Jesus unless they are, don't miss this, taught by God. It doesn't say that the Holy Spirit will make you feel guilty and convict you of sin. Nope. It says you can't come to Jesus unless you're drawn by God directly. It says taught. You see, these pesky little Bible verses keep ruining all of our bad theology. I guess we'll have to go back to burning people at the stake for publishing copies of the Bible. I mean, Jesus is quoting from Isaiah 54. Yes, there's even more pesky Bible. It says that the children will be taught by the Lord. As in, the teaching of parents is replaced. Nobody can... The teaching of parents is replaced with direct teaching from the Lord. How much more relevant can that be? Nobody. What Jesus says is, nobody, no one can become a Christian just because they heard about Jesus from some person or some writing or something like that. They have to be taught by Jesus. My friends, there is a word, and it's amazing. They have to meet Jesus personally, and in that case, it wouldn't even matter if they called him Jesus or wooka wooka wooka, because they're communicating with him personally, directly. It doesn't even matter if you get his name right. You can call him you, that I know, that one. Now maybe you're wondering why you should bother telling people about Jesus if God doesn't need you. Friend, if that is you, then consider this your attitude adjustment. If you think life is pointless, if it isn't about your personal greatness, then let me introduce you to someone. God. Yes, God. Jesus told us that the meaning of life is to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. If God is calling people to himself and we love God, why on earth would we not want to be involved? Because we're arrogant narcissists who think God exists to affirm our personal greatness just like everyone else exists to affirm your personal greatness. I mean, duh, right? Why on earth would the worship of the one true God be considered a motivation for doing anything? It's not about you. If we start, being motivated by worship, we may end up even obeying some commandments. I mean, give me a break. The all-powerful, all-knowing creator of the universe is defeating evil in the hearts of people. And you expect me to get involved because you aren't going to make it all about me? Okay, so, off the sarcasm horse. So if you are actually still with me at this point, then we can talk about some curious questions. There are those people with whom humanity has no way to communicate, but God can. How? Well, it's kind of up to him, but we can theorize, right? At this point, I have to warn everyone, including myself, don't limit God to what you think he can and cannot do. Let God be God and surprise us. Nothing we have to take into account. No, my bad. Read it wrong. Yeah, I wrote a script. Nonetheless, we have to take into account what we observe. If you haven't caught the documentary, it's called More Than Dreams, and you should watch it. It features numerous stories of young people growing up in Muslim lands where it's basically illegal to tell people about Jesus. At some point, Jesus comes to them in dreams and they become Christians. Through their dreams. They have dreams about Jesus. After this, their lives are usually in danger. Now, the noted Christian apologist Ravi Zacharias has said somewhere that more people in the Muslim world come to Christ this way than any other, and if the laws against leaving the Muslim faith were were lifted, we would see a mass exodus. In other words, in Muslim lands, it's against the law if you're the child of Muslim parents to be anything other than a Muslim. That's called apostasy, and there's apostasy laws. But what he says is, if those apostasy laws were lifted, we would see a mass exodus away from Islam. Now, Christian philosophers, Alvin Plantinga and William Lane Craig, they have grounded belief in God as properly basic knowledge. I mean, they give arguments for God's existence, but they add this to the milieu. Before I begin to explain it, I want you to remember that belief in God is only one part of the message of Jesus. If you've forgotten that already, that we talked about so much before, then you just turn off your computer and eat SpaghettiOs. Now, a properly basic belief is knowledge that is the most certain knowledge you can have. Alright, so let me explain an example. Hold your hand in front of your face. Your hand, it may be an illusion. You may be seeing things. There may not actually be a hand there. I mean, we've all seen David Copperfield and David Blaine do crazy things. This is the point. But the fact that you see a hand is a properly basic belief. It's properly basic knowledge. It's basic in the most proper way. Alright? Now, our aforementioned philosophers, they claim that belief in God is such a belief. Alright? That it's properly basic. Now, let me give my 2 cents. For me, the issue is that pesky Bible. If it is true, as the Bible claims, that all creation is proof for God's existence, which would mean us, which would mean my brain, which would mean my soul, which would mean the dirt, which would mean, frogs and my bills and music, everything other than God is God's creation. If it's really true that all of that is proof for God's existence, then this kind of blurs the line between properly basic beliefs and the other ways we come to knowledge. If this biblical claim is true, then we should expect to find lots of people that believe in Jesus and are certain God's real, and they can't even explain why. That's what we should expect, and that is what we see. It would just seem obvious to people. Because there's so many reasons, it's hard to just say why. Words are hard to use. In other words, we could analyze and deduce proofs for God's existence, but it would really just be a tiny glimpse of the larger picture. What if absolutely everything proved God's existence? How could we really formulate that into a formal argument? What propositions and what inferences and what deductions could we possibly use? Words themselves would seem like tiny little things that are too precise to communicate the abundant and profound truths that permeate everything. God is the creator, and so all that exists is His creation, from your soul to your soles on your shoes. Alright? It's been nice. Read your Bibles, say your prayers, and take your vitamins. Get your pets spayed and neutered, eat more fiber, and stop paying money to watch terrible movies.